He left me for a younger woman after my sacrifice and making him who he is. My name is Linda Holloway, and I'm from Savannah, Georgia. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're watching from, because it comforts me to know I'm not just talking to myself. And before I begin, please hit like and subscribe. Join this little family of women who know what heartbreak really feels like. Now, let me take you to the night my world cracked open. It was a quiet Tuesday. I had just finished cooking Michael's favorite, roasted chicken with honey glaze, and I remember humming to myself while setting the table. After 28 years of marriage, routines like that become part of your breathing. He was late again, but that wasn't new. Lately, his meetings had been running longer, and the scent on his shirts wasn't mine anymore. Still, I told myself he was just stressed, maybe chasing a new client. I wanted to believe that. At 8:43 p.m., I heard his car pull into the driveway. I wiped my hands, fixed my hair, and smiled like a fool, waiting for a man who'd already left me in his heart. He walked in, avoided my eyes, and said, "Linda, we need to talk." Those 5 words, they sound simple until you hear them from the person who once promised forever. I remember sitting down slowly, gripping the edge of the table so I wouldn't tremble. The smell of the chicken was thick in the room, sweet and heavy, like it knew it wouldn't be eaten. He started talking about how he'd lost himself, how we'd grown apart. I watched his lips move, but I couldn't hear a thing after he said her name, her, the young accountant. From his office, the one I'd met at the Christmas party. She'd shaken my hand with that soft-spoken respect people use with older women they secretly pity. I asked him one question, how long? He couldn't look at me. He just whispered, almost a year. I laughed, a sound so loud it startled both of us. Because when pain is too big, laughter sometimes shows up first. He said he didn't want to hurt me anymore. He thought honesty was kindness. I wanted to ask if he thought betrayal was mercy too. But I didn't. I just nodded and told him dinner was getting cold. When he packed his bag, I stood by the kitchen window and watched. I'd spent half my life watching that same man tie his shoes, rush to work, come home tired, kiss me on the cheek, and now I was watching him erase all of it. The door closed behind him, and the house exhaled like it had been holding its breath. That night I sat on the living room floor, still in my apron, surrounded by photographs. There was one from our 10th anniversary in Florida, him holding me while the waves crashed. He'd written on the back, "To my forever girl." Forever lasted exactly 28 years and 3 months. I didn't cry that night. I just kept staring at the photo until the colors blurred. Because the worst pain isn't the one that makes you cry. It's the one that makes you numb. The next morning I woke up to silence. No coffee brewing, no footsteps upstairs. Just the ticking of the clock and the faint smell of his cologne fading from the air. I tried to make breakfast, but the eggs burned. I tried to fold laundry, but I found one of his shirts and couldn't breathe. I went outside and watered the plants, hoping the neighbors wouldn't notice my swollen eyes. Days turned into weeks. Everyone in town seemed to know before I did. Church friends called with pity in their voices, like I'd been widowed by choice. And then one afternoon, while I was at the grocery store, I saw them, Michael and her, walking down the same aisle, laughing like teenagers. She was holding his arm, the same way I used to. He saw me. His smile dropped, guilt flickered across his face, but she didn't notice. She just leaned in closer, whispering something that made him chuckle. I stood frozen, holding a carton of milk I didn't even need. When they passed, she gave me that same polite smile, the kind that says, "I've won." I went home, closed the blinds, and finally cried. Not because he left, but because I had become invisible to someone I'd built my whole life around. That night, I made myself a promise. I didn't know how or when, but one day, he'd see me again. And when he did, he'd remember exactly what he threw away. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's rebuilding so quietly that they have to look up just to find you again. I didn't know it then, but life was already preparing my comeback. And Michael. He was about to face a storm he never saw coming. The morning after I saw Michael with her, I woke up feeling older than my years. Not physically, but somewhere deeper. In the part of a woman that measures time by who still needs her. For 28 years, every choice I made had his name written somewhere on it. Suddenly it was just mine, and that was terrifying. I started moving through days like a ghost in my own house. I kept hearing the echo of laughter from that grocery store aisle. It followed me into the kitchen, into the shower, into sleep. One evening I caught myself setting 2 plates on the table out of habit. I stared at them for a long minute, then slid one back into the cabinet. That sound, porcelain scraping wood, felt like a closing door. A week later, I found a job at a small bakery downtown. It wasn't about money. It was about air. The smell of warm bread, the chatter of strangers. It reminded me that life still existed outside the walls of my silence. The owner, Ms. Jean, was a widow in her 60s with a laugh that could cut through grief. She took one look at me and said, "Honey, you've got that look." The one people get when they've lost everything except the need to prove they can survive. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Every morning I arrived before sunrise, tying my apron with the precision of a soldier, mixing dough, stacking muffins, cleaning counters, simple things, but they steadied me. Sometimes Ms. Jean would hum old gospel songs, and I'd join softly. There was something holy in those early hours. Maybe healing wears an apron too. Then one afternoon, a man came in asking for a birthday cake for his wife. He looked about my age, kind eyes, no wedding ring. He joked that he couldn't bake to save his life. For the first time since the separation, I caught myself laughing without guilt. When he left, Ms. Jean leaned over the counter. "You see that? Still got light in you. Don't hide it." I wanted to believe her. But nights were different. Nights were the battlefield, because that's when memories show up. Not the big ones, but the quiet ones. The way Michael used to brush crumbs off my shoulder. The sound of his keys hitting the table. The dent on his side of the mattress. 3 months passed like that. Slow, lonely, strangely educational. I learned how to eat alone at restaurants, how to fix a leaking tap, how to walk into church without feeling like a failure. People whispered, of course. Small towns thrive on stories. But I kept my head up. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, handwriting I'd know anywhere. Michael's. Inside was a check for $2,000 and a note. "Linda, I know I hurt you. I didn't mean for things to turn out this way. I just want to help until you get back on your feet." I tore it in half. I didn't need hush money for my dignity. 2 weeks later, Ms. Jean told me she wanted to retire and offered me the bakery lease. My heart stopped. I didn't have savings, but she said she'd finance half because every woman deserves a second act. That night I prayed, not the kind of prayer that begs, but the kind that negotiates. God, if you still see me, show me how to start again. The next morning, opportunity answered in its own strange way. Local radio announced that Michael's company had collapsed under investigation for fraud. He'd been forced to resign. Reporters said financial mismanagement, but I knew pride when I saw it fall. Part of me wanted to smile. Another part felt nothing, because revenge, when it finally arrives, never looks as satisfying as we imagine. Still, something shifted inside me. For the first time, I wasn't the one crumbling. By summer, the bakery had new paint, new signage, Sweet Grace Bakes. My hands smelled of cinnamon instead of sadness. Customers started calling me Miss Linda like I was everyone's favorite aunt. I posted photos on Facebook, my pies, my smiles, tiny proofs of life. Comments poured in from old friends, women I hadn't spoken to in years. "You look happy again." Maybe I was. Then one rainy Thursday, the bell above the bakery door rang. I turned, wiping flour from my hands, and froze. Michael stood there, drenched, thinner, older. He looked nothing like the man who left. His confidence had melted into regret. "Linda," he said softly, voice shaking, "can we talk?" The room went silent except for the rain tapping the window. Ms. Jean wasn't there. Customers had just left. It was just him and me, and the ghost of everything we used to be. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but my throat locked. He took a slow step closer, water dripping from his jacket onto the floor. "I made mistakes," he began. "She's gone. Everything's gone. I didn't know where else to go." For a moment I just watched him. The same man who once said he needed freedom now looked trapped inside his own choices. Finally I took a breath. "You came to the right place," I said quietly, Because this bakery is where broken things rise." He blinked, confused, maybe even hopeful. But inside me, something stronger than revenge stirred. Power, control, peace. Still, I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. "Sit down," I told him, motioning toward the empty table by the window. "Let's see what you've got to say." As he sat, lightning flashed outside, catching the gold ring I still wore but no longer claimed. And in that flicker of light I realized the story wasn't about losing him. It was about finding me. But he didn't know that yet. Because what happened next would change both our lives and teach him that when a woman rebuilds herself, she becomes someone you can never break again. That's the end of my husband's story for now, because I can't go deep before I start crying. So about my son, when I came back from the hospital, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. My name was still on the mortgage. My hands had scrubbed every inch of that kitchen for 20 years, but the air had changed. Cold, thick, like even the walls knew. I'd been betrayed. David sat at the dining table, scrolling on his phone like nothing happened. My son Ethan avoided eye contact. His fiancée, Jenna, the one whose wedding I had paid for, was laughing softly on the couch, whispering something that made him smile. It felt like watching a stranger take my place in my own story. "Dinner's ready," I said, voice low. Jenna didn't even look up. "Oh, we already ordered takeout." That's when I saw the fancy catering bags on the counter, the same company I had paid a deposit to for their wedding reception. I stood there for a second, holding the wooden spoon like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. My heart wanted to break down. My pride told me to stand tall. David glanced at me, half annoyed. "Linda, don't make a scene, please. We've had enough drama this week." "Enough drama?" I almost laughed. The man who slept beside me for 3 decades had watched our son uninvite me from his wedding and said nothing. Now I was the problem for breathing too loudly. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "No scene. Enjoy your meal." I walked to the guest room and locked the door. For the first time in my life, I ate in silence, just rice and tears. The next morning, I woke to the sound of laughter. Through the thin walls, I could hear Jenna showing Ethan something on her phone. Wedding pictures. Maybe. Every giggle was another stab in my chest. I stepped out quietly. My coffee mug trembled in my hand. "So," I said softly, "you both looked beautiful in the photos." Ethan froze. Jenna shifted uncomfortably. "Thanks," he muttered, eyes fixed on the floor. "Did it rain?" I asked, pretending to sound casual. "It did," he said quickly. "But it was perfect." I nodded, even though my heart was crumbling. I had bought her gown. I had chosen his tuxedo. I had spent months picking out centerpieces, tasting cakes, helping plan the day I never got to attend. Then Jenna said something that finally cracked me. "Honestly, Linda, it was probably better you didn't come. It would have been awkward, with all the tension." Her tone was polite, but the knife was clean. I placed my mug down. "Awkward?" I repeated slowly. "You mean awkward that I'm his mother?" Ethan sighed. "Mom, please." "No, you listen," I cut him off, trembling. "I worked 3 jobs when your father lost his business. I sold my mother's pearls to pay your college tuition. I pawned my wedding ring to get your first car. And you're telling me I was too awkward to stand at your wedding?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. No words. Just guilt, maybe, or fear. David walked in, buttoning his shirt like he was late for work. "Linda, drop it. It's over." I turned to him. "You helped him do this. You stood there and watched your wife be erased." David's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." Something snapped in me that moment. I realized I wasn't fighting for their love anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. "I'm not being dramatic," I said quietly. "I'm being done." That night, I packed a single suitcase. No one noticed. They were too busy watching TV. But as I stood by the door, Ethan suddenly called out, "Mom?" I turned. He looked like a little boy again for half a second. "Where are you going?" I smiled faintly. "Somewhere I'm invited." The door clicked behind me, softer than my heartbreak, but louder than any argument we ever had. I didn't cry in the car. Not yet, I just drove. Past the church, past the florist shop that once had my name on their client list, past the life I built brick by brick. When I finally pulled over, the tears came like a flood. But under all that pain, a small spark was waking up. The kind of strength only a woman who's been betrayed can understand. And that was the night I decided, if my story was going to be rewritten, I would be the one holding the pen. I checked into a small roadside motel in Baton Rouge. Louisiana, the kind of place that smells like old coffee and rain-soaked carpet. The clerk didn't ask questions. Just handed me a key with a faded number 7. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I sat on the bed staring at the peeling wallpaper, wondering how my life had folded in on itself so quickly. But peace, real peace, needs silence first. And for the first time in years, I could finally hear myself think. I pulled out my phone. Dozens of missed calls, all from my sister Sharon. None from Ethan, none from David. Figures. When I finally picked up, Sharon didn't waste a second. "Linda, Lord, where are you?" "The whole family's talking." "They said you walked out." "I didn't walk out," I said flatly. "I walked away." She went quiet for a beat. "You sound tired." "I am." Then she sighed. "I know what happened, Linda. Ethan's wedding, the way they treated you. It's shameful. But you have to come home. You can't just disappear like that." "Home?" I laughed dryly. "You mean the house where I paid the bills and they treated me like an intruder?" "No, Sharon, that's not home anymore." There was another pause. Then, carefully, she said, "There's something you need to know." "What?" "I saw Jenna's mother at the market this morning. She said Ethan didn't pay for the wedding." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "She said David covered most of it. Not you." That couldn't be right. "I wired every payment. The deposits, the florist, even the photographer. My credit card still carried the scars." Sharon lowered her voice. "Linda, she said the account was under David's name. You might want to check your bank statements." After that call, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my banking app. And then I saw it. Every transaction, every payment, every dollar I'd spent for that wedding, all transferred from our joint account. Not my savings, our. David had quietly switched the funds, making it look like he was the one footing the bills. That man had stolen not just my dignity, but my sacrifice. I remember sitting on the edge of that motel bed, laughing and crying at the same time. The absurdity of it. The betrayal under my own roof. That's when I decided to drive back. Not to beg, not to fix anything. To face it. When I reached the house 2 days later, the driveway was empty. I stepped inside, slow and steady, and that's when I saw the envelope. It was lying on the kitchen counter, unsealed. My name on it. Inside was a letter from Jenna. "Linda, I know things got tense, but you should understand. Ethan and I just wanted a peaceful start. You've always been intense, always too involved. We thought leaving you out would avoid more drama. I hope one day you'll forgive us. Jenna." I read it twice. Too involved. That was her version of a mother who spent half her life keeping that boy from starving. But then another paper slipped out from the envelope, one I wasn't meant to see. A printed copy of an email from David to Jenna, dated 2 months earlier. "Don't worry, I'll handle Linda. She's emotional. But I'll convince her to stay away from the ceremony. It'll save us all embarrassment." I froze. Embarrassment. That's what I was to them. Something inside me went still. A dangerous kind of still. The kind that doesn't break anymore. It calculates. I folded the letter back, slid it into my purse, and looked around the house one last time. The family pictures on the wall suddenly looked like props. The smiling faces, all lies now. So I took one picture down, just one. The one where Ethan was 6, missing a tooth, holding my hand at the park. That little boy didn't know how to be cruel yet. That's the version of him I would keep. That night, I drove straight to Sharon's. She opened the door and gasped when she saw my face. "Linda, you look like you've seen a ghost." "I did," I said quietly. "And his name was David." She didn't ask much. Just made me tea and sat beside me on the couch. We didn't talk for a while. Sometimes silence says everything. Finally, I said it out loud, the words that had been buried in my chest for years. I spent so much time making sure they were okay that I forgot to make sure I was okay. Sharon nodded, tears in her eyes. "So what now?" I looked out the window, at the dark sky over Baton Rouge. Now? I rebuild. But this time, for me. It wasn't revenge yet, But it was the beginning of something stronger, something they wouldn't see coming. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to rise. The next morning, I woke up in Sharon's guest room to the sound of her radio humming, some old country gospel. For a second, I forgot everything that had happened. The scent of pancakes, the sunlight creeping through the blinds. It almost felt like life before betrayal. Almost, but peace has a way of turning into purpose when pain refuses to fade. I walked into the kitchen. Sharon flipped a pancake and smiled. "You sleep any?" "Barely," I said, pouring coffee. "But I think I've finally stopped crying." "That's a start," she said softly. As I stirred the cup, I looked at my reflection in the dark surface. My eyes were swollen, but my mind was clear. For years I had played the quiet wife, the forgiving mother, the fixer of every mess. But that version of me died the night I found that email. I wasn't the embarrassed one anymore. They were. They just didn't know it yet. Sharon left for her shift at the diner, and I sat alone at her old laptop. I opened a new document and began typing. The words poured out like a dam finally breaking. It wasn't a letter. It was a confession, not for guilt, but for truth. I titled it, "The Mother Who Paid for a Wedding She Wasn't Invited to." I wrote for 6 straight hours. Every detail, every sacrifice, every manipulation. The empty dinner tables, the lies about the bank account, the humiliation of being erased from my own family's milestone. I didn't name names, but anyone who knew us would connect the dots. By sunset, my hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't weakness. It was power returning. I uploaded it anonymously to a local online community forum, Real Stories from the South. At first, nothing happened. Then by the next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Thousands of views, dozens of comments. I felt this in my bones. I went through the same thing with my son. This woman is every mother who gave too much. It spread faster than gossip in a church parking lot. Sharon came home waving her phone. "Linda, you're trending." I blinked. Trending? Look. She shoved the screen in my face. My story had been shared on Facebook groups, Reddit threads, even local news pages. People were arguing, crying, defending me. Some guessed who I was, others didn't care. But one comment stopped me cold. "Isn't this about David and Ethan Cooper?" Baton Rouge? My heart jumped. That was my family name. Within hours, David's company page started getting tagged. Ethan's photo with Jenna started receiving angry emojis. The internet had connected the dots all on its own. For once, I didn't rush to fix it. I just sat there sipping tea, watching karma do what I couldn't. The following evening, my phone rang. David. "Linda," his voice hissed through the receiver. "What did you do?" "I told the truth," I said calmly. "You humiliated us." I smiled faintly. "You did that yourself." He paused, then tried a softer tone. "Look, we all said things we didn't mean. Come home. Let's fix this before it gets worse." "Worse?" I repeated. "David, I was uninvited from my own son's wedding." "It doesn't get worse. It only gets clearer." I hung up. My hands were steady. Minutes later, Ethan called too. His voice cracked like a child caught lying. "Mom, please take that story down." I stayed silent for a moment. Then I said, "You didn't want me at your wedding." "Ethan, but you're sure calling me now that the world sees you." He whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Yes, you did," I said. "You just didn't think I'd ever stop forgiving you." I ended the call before the tears came back. That night, Sharon and I sat on the porch. Crickets hummed in the yard, and the summer air was heavy with the smell of magnolia. "You know," she said, "this might be the best thing that's ever happened to you." "How's that?" "You've always carried everyone else's story. Now the world's carrying yours." I smiled faintly. "Feels strange?" "To be seen." She looked at me for a long second. "So what now?" I leaned back in the rocking chair, the wood creaking under my weight. "Now I live. Maybe I volunteer at that women's shelter downtown. Maybe I start writing again. Whatever it is, it'll be mine." 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. A producer from a regional talk show emailed me. They wanted to feature my story. A mother's betrayal. The woman who paid for love she never received. They didn't know my real name yet, but they said my writing had touched hearts across the country. That night, I stared at the email. feeling that same mix of fear and courage that comes before a new beginning. For years I thought my life was over because my family turned their backs. But maybe, just maybe, this was the start of the life I was supposed to have all along. The kind where I wasn't a background character, but the leading woman. I looked at my reflection in Sharon's kitchen window, older, tired, but unbroken. They underestimated me, I whispered. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't cry. I smiled, because when a woman finds her voice after being silenced for too long, the world always listens. When the producer's email first landed in my inbox, I thought it was spam. Subject line, feature request, a mother's betrayal. For 2 days I ignored it, certain it was some scam looking to feed off my pain. But the third morning, a woman named Melissa Grant called. She sounded young, polite, nervous, like she knew she was stepping into someone's storm. Mrs. Cooper, I'm a field producer with Bayview Today, a regional talk show out of New Orleans. We've been following your story online. It's striking a chord. Would you consider telling it yourself, on camera? I remember staring at my coffee mug for a long time before answering. Why now? She said softly. Because thousands of women are writing and saying, it's their story too. And that's how it started. The studio sent a car for me the next Friday. Sharon insisted on coming. I wanted to go alone, but she said, somebody's gotta make sure you don't slap anybody if they mention that man's name. We laughed, but there was a knot in my stomach that laughter couldn't untie. The driver, a kid who looked barely 20, kept glancing at me through the mirror. You're her, right? The lady from the story? I gave a small smile. Guess so. He grinned. My grandma cried reading that thing. Said you spoke what she's held in for years. I turned my face toward the window. Outside, the Louisiana sun spilled over the bayou, gold and heavy. It felt like a world that had forgiven me already. When we reached the studio, the air was electric. Lights, cables, makeup brushes moving like dragonflies. Melissa met me at the door, all business but kind. You look beautiful, she said. Natural, just how we wanted. Sharon squeezed my hand. You got this. They mic'd me up, powdered my cheeks, and walked me toward the set, a cozy living room, style stage with soft yellow lighting. Across from me sat Tanya Price, the host everyone in the South knew, calm voice, sharp mind, eyes that saw right through pretense. Linda, I'm honored you're here, she said before the cameras rolled. If anything feels too heavy, we can stop any time. I nodded. I'm ready. When the red light blinked on, I took a deep breath. Tanya smiled for the audience. Today, we're joined by a woman whose anonymous story, the mother who paid for a wedding. She wasn't invited to, has been shared over 2 million times in less than a month. She's here for the first time to tell us why. She turned to me. Linda, welcome. The applause was gentle but long. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed being greeted with kindness. Thank you, I said, voice trembling just enough. Tanya leaned forward. Let's start with the hardest part. You gave everything for your family and they excluded you. What went through your mind that day? I felt every camera tilt toward me. I thought it was a mistake, I said quietly. That maybe someone forgot to send me the invite. You know, mothers make excuses for the people they love. But when I realized they meant that they didn't want me there. Because I'd make them uncomfortable, something inside me stopped breaking. It just went still. The studio was silent except for the faint buzz of the lights. Tanya let the pause sit. She knew the power of quiet. And you left, she said softly. Yes, I left before I begged anyone to remember I existed. They showed a still image of me younger, holding Ethan as a baby. The audience murmured. Tanya said, You wrote that you paid for the entire wedding. Why keep giving when they'd already shut you out? I swallowed. Because mothers don't turn love off like a switch, even when it burns them. Someone in the front row sniffled. Tanya reached out, her hand barely touching mine. Did you expect your story to go viral? I shook my head. No, I just needed to breathe. Writing was the only air I had left. Then Tanya did something I didn't expect. She said, We reached out to your son, Ethan, and your ex-husband, David. They declined to appear, but they sent statements. Would you like to hear them? Sharon's breath caught behind the curtain. I hesitated, but the audience was holding its breath too. Go ahead, I said. Tanya read from a card. Ethan Cooper says, I regret how things unfolded. I love my mother, and I wish we could heal privately rather than publicly. That line privately made the crowd stir. I smiled faintly. Privately is where the hurt began. Tanya nodded, then read David's statement. David Cooper states, Our family matters should not be exploited for sympathy or attention. We hope people remember there are two sides to every story. A few audience members groaned under their breath. I leaned forward, voice steady. He's right about one thing. There are two sides. Mine was silent for 28 years. His was loud. I just evened the volume. The audience clapped softly, the kind that comes from hearts, not hands. During the next break, Melissa ran over whispering, Linda, social media's blowing up right now. She showed me a monitor. Hashtags with my name were trending again. Clips from the live feed were already circulating with captions like, This is every mom's revenge without shouting. I felt tears well up, not from sadness, but something close to freedom. When the cameras rolled again, Tanya asked, If your son was watching right now, what would you tell him? I looked straight into the lens. Ethan, love doesn't erase accountability. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean I'll shrink back into silence. I raised you to stand for truth. Now I'm just following my own advice. A hush spread through the studio. Some women in the back were crying openly. Tanya looked shaken. You just spoke for so many mothers, she whispered. After the show, the staff applauded quietly as I walked off set. Melissa hugged me hard. You have no idea what you just did. Outside, the air smelled like rain. Sharon was waiting near the car, phone in hand, face glowing. Linda, you broke the internet again. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Good, I said. Let the truth stay viral this time. That night, back at Sharon's house, I opened my laptop. Notifications flooded in. Women from Texas, Ohio, California. Widows, single moms, grandmothers. They all said the same thing in different words. You told my story. I read every comment until my eyes blurred. Then one message stopped me cold. From Jenna C. Subject, I'm sorry. Linda, I watched the interview. I was wrong. Ethan was wrong. We were young and selfish. He's been a wreck all day. Please, can we talk? My hands hovered over the keyboard. For once, I didn't rush to fix anything. I simply whispered, not yet. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere deep across the bayou. It sounded less like danger this time, and more like applause. When the producer signaled 5 minutes left, Linda could barely keep her hands from shaking. The studio air had turned still, heavy, like everyone was holding their breath with her. She could hear her own voice echoing in her head. I paid for my son's wedding. And they didn't invite me. She'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in her kitchen mirror. But saying it out loud under those bright lights made the pain feel brand new. The host leaned forward gently. Linda, if your son is watching right now, what would you want to say to him? That question cracked something open. I'd tell him, she began, her eyes glassy but steady, that no mother should have to beg for a chair at her child's joy. I don't need his money or his approval. I just wanted to see him smile. That's all. The audience stayed quiet. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Linda blinked hard. I kept every photo from his childhood. The birthday cakes I couldn't afford but baked anyway. The shoes I bought secondhand so he'd never feel poor. I thought love was enough. Maybe I was wrong. Her voice faltered on the last line. The host reached for a tissue. But Linda waved it off with a faint smile, tired, dignified. A soft clap started from the front row, hesitant, then spread until the entire audience stood. It wasn't applause for a story. It was a kind of mourning. Collective ache for all the mothers who had done too much and been forgotten anyway. When the segment ended, the lights dimmed, and the crew started packing up. Linda sat still, staring at her folded hands. The host came over quietly. You were brave today, she said. Linda nodded. It doesn't feel like bravery. It feels like breaking. Sometimes they're the same thing. Backstage, a young assistant handed her phone back. Notifications were exploding, hundreds of comments, messages, tags. People calling her the voice of every mother. But she didn't open them, not yet. Instead, she scrolled to her son's number, hovered her thumb over call, didn't press it. Just watched the name until her eyes blurred again. In that moment, regret hit harder than anger ever had. She thought about the first time she held him, the tiny heartbeat against her chest, how she'd whispered promises that life later stole piece by piece. She wondered if he remembered any of it, or if all he saw now was a woman too proud, too poor, too plain for his new world. Her driver asked softly, "Ma'am, are you ready to go?" Linda nodded. "Yes, take me home." As the city lights flickered by through the car window, she caught her reflection, older, worn, but still there. The woman who raised a man the world admired, but who no one invited to the celebration. She whispered to the window, "Maybe this is what letting go feels like." But deep down, she knew she hadn't really let go. Not yet. Not until he looked her in the eye again. The night after the show, Linda didn't sleep. She brewed coffee at 2 a.m., sat by the window, and listened to the low hum of traffic. Every car that passed felt like a heartbeat she no longer owned. Her phone was still buzzing, hundreds of missed calls. Messages from strangers saying things like, "You reminded me of my mother, and I called my mom today because of you." Those words hit harder than applause. They hurt and healed at the same time. When dawn crawled in, she opened her front door to find 3 envelopes tucked beneath it. One was from a neighbor she barely knew, an older woman named Carol. Inside was a short note. "You spoke for all of us. Don't close your heart just yet." The second envelope was from the studio, thanking her for the appearance and offering to cover therapy sessions if she wanted them. She smiled, kind gesture, but therapy wasn't what she needed. She needed closure. The third was from her son's wife. The handwriting made her stomach twist. She unfolded the paper slowly. "Linda, I watched the interview. I cried. I don't know how things got this far. We thought protecting him from guilt was the right thing. It wasn't. He's been quiet all night. Please give him time. Emily." Linda's chest tightened. She read it twice, then pressed the note to her lips. Give him time. She had already given him 32 years. But maybe for once, time would return the favor. That afternoon, she took a walk to clear her head. At the corner store, 2 women stopped her. "Ma'am, were you the lady on TV?" Linda hesitated. "I suppose I was." One of them hugged her without asking. "You made me call my boy. We haven't spoken in 6 months." Linda smiled faintly. Then it was worth it. For the first time in weeks, she felt something unclench inside. Not forgiveness yet, just space for it. When she got home, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then answered. "Mom?" Her throat closed. She hadn't heard that voice since the wedding planning months before. "David?" Silence, then a breath. I saw the interview." Her knees went weak. She sank into the couch. "I didn't know how much it hurt you," he said. "Emily tried to tell me, but I didn't listen. I thought you were being difficult. I thought—" He trailed off. "I was wrong." Tears streamed silently down her face. "You're still my boy, David. That hasn't changed." "I know," he whispered. "And if you'll let me, I want to make it right." Linda exhaled shakily, almost laughing through tears. "Just invite me home for dinner." "That's all I ever wanted." "I will," he said. "Soon." The line went quiet, but this silence felt different, soft, alive. She stared at the window again, watching morning fade into gold. For the first time, her reflection didn't look like a woman left behind. It looked like a survivor of her own heartbreak. She whispered, "Thank you, God, for giving me one more chance." The morning after the interview, I woke up to a silence I hadn't felt in months. It was heavy, but not oppressive, more like the pause before a storm clears. I brewed coffee and sat by the window, watching the sunlight spill across the yard. My phone sat on the counter, vibrating nonstop with notifications, but I didn't pick it up right away. I wanted to feel this moment first, the quiet after chaos, the space where I could breathe again. Finally, curiosity won. I scrolled through the flood of messages and comments. Women from every corner of the country were reaching out. Grandmothers, mothers, even daughters who had read my story and felt something stir inside them. "You spoke what I couldn't," one comment read. I'm crying because this is me, said another. Thank you for showing strength without hate. It wasn't just praise. Some people were angry, defending my family or claiming I had gone too far. But I didn't care. This was my voice, my story, and it needed to be heard. Then I noticed dozens of messages from local reporters and bloggers. My story wasn't just trending online. It was starting to become real news. I realized that what I thought was just personal pain had tapped into something universal. The silent suffering of mothers everywhere. I took a deep breath and stepped outside. The air smelled like rain and magnolia. Sharon joined me, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You've broken the internet, Linda, she said softly, using my name like it belonged only to me. People are talking, sharing, calling their own children. They see themselves in you. I shook my head. I didn't do this for that. I did this so they'd know I'm still here, that I always was. She nodded. And now the world knows too. I sipped the coffee slowly, feeling the warmth spread through me. I thought about Ethan and David. My phone buzzed again, and I saw Ethan's name on the screen. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the call button. Finally, I pressed it. Mom? His voice cracked like it had been folded under years of guilt and shame. I'm here, I said softly. I've always been here. There was a pause. I didn't know how much I hurt you. I thought you'd always forgive and move on. I didn't see your pain. I did forgive, Ethan, I whispered. But forgiveness isn't the same as pretending nothing happened. I've spent too many years pretending. I know, he said, voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I need to make this right. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall freely. Just come home for dinner, I said. That's all I ever wanted. I will, he promised. By midday, the story had spread even further. Clips from the interview were being shared in Facebook groups, Twitter threads, and community pages. People were debating, sympathizing, sharing their own pain, and writing long, heartfelt comments. Some even called into local radio stations to talk about me. I sat in the quiet of my living room, letting it all sink in. My heart was heavy, but lighter than it had been in years. The world had finally seen me. I wasn't invisible anymore. Sharon came in with a tray of sandwiches. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Better than okay? I feel alive again, like I finally get to take up space in my own life. She smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping for. I leaned back, thinking of the journey that had brought me here, the wedding I wasn't invited to, the months of silent rage and heartbreak, the endless nights of wondering if I'd ever be seen. All of it had led to this moment, the quiet before a new chapter. And for the first time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, this chapter would be mine entirely. The next few days were surreal. Everywhere I went, people recognized me. At the grocery store, the cashier whispered, "Are you?" before she looked embarrassed and smiled. At the pharmacy, a woman stopped me in the aisle and grabbed my hand. I watched your interview. You made me call my daughter. Thank you. It was strange, this mix of admiration and vulnerability. I had never sought attention. All I wanted was to be seen by my own son, and somehow the world had tuned in to my quiet desperation. I spent the mornings reading messages, the afternoons walking in the park with Sharon, and the evenings thinking about what the reunion would be like. Ethan had promised dinner, but I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't naive enough to believe everything would magically be okay. Pain like ours didn't just vanish because cameras captured it. Finally, the day arrived. I stood in my living room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was brushed, my clothes simple but neat, and my hands trembled slightly as I adjusted my sleeves. Sharon came behind me and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You look incredible," she said. "Not because of your outfit, because of you." I smiled faintly but didn't feel it. My stomach was tied in knots. The doorbell rang. My heart jumped. I opened it to see Ethan, standing there with his hands in his pockets, looking smaller than he had in my memory. David followed behind him, eyes downcast. "Mom," Ethan said quietly. His voice was raw, shaking. I stepped aside. "Come in." They entered, the air thick with words left unspoken. I closed the door, and we stood in the living room for a long moment. It was as if the world outside had disappeared, leaving just the three of us in a fragile bubble of tension and hope. Ethan swallowed hard. I don't know how to start. I hurt you, Mom. I hurt you more than I realized. You did, I said softly, but acknowledging it is the first step. David cleared his throat. I failed to see what you were giving, what you sacrificed. I thought it was expected. I didn't realize how much it cost you. I took a slow breath. It cost me my trust in you for a long time. But I never stopped loving you, Ethan. That's the hardest part. He stepped forward and embraced me. I let myself melt into it, holding him tightly, feeling the years of distance and hurt compress into a single moment. David hesitated, then joined, awkwardly at first, but sincerity shone through. Sharon poured tea for all of us and set it on the table. We sat together, the air still heavy, but something had shifted. The tension was there, yes, but it was no longer unbearable. It had been acknowledged. We spoke quietly, slowly, each word measured, each confession honest. Ethan apologized again and again, but I stopped him. You don't have to repeat it. Just live differently from now on. That's what matters. David nodded. We will. We promise. As the evening went on, I felt a warmth I hadn't allowed myself to feel in decades. Not happiness exactly, but a sense of restoration. The hurt was still there, but it had been witnessed. Acknowledged and softened by honesty. Later, after they left, I stood by the window and looked out at the city lights. The notifications were still flooding in online. People were reacting to clips of the reunion, praising our honesty, sharing their own family struggles. Comments poured in. This made me cry. Thank you for showing strength. I hope my children see me like this one day. I realized then that the story wasn't just mine. It had become every mother's story, every silent heartbreak finally voiced. I whispered to myself, this is why I spoke. This is why I survived. The phone buzzed one last time before I put it down. A comment notification. Linda, you are every mother I know. Thank you for your courage. I can't wait to hear your next story. And for the first time in years, I felt truly seen. Not just by my son or by my ex-husband, but by the world. The days after the reunion were quiet, but not empty. I woke each morning with a strange lightness in my chest. It wasn't that the past had disappeared. It never would, but it no longer controlled me. I had spoken my truth. I had faced the people I loved most, and I had been heard. Scrolling through social media, I saw it everywhere. Clips of the interview, screenshots of messages, comments from women across the country. Some were crying, some were laughing, some were just nodding, finally seeing themselves in my story. This is what it feels like to be truly seen, I thought. I realized something then. My story didn't just belong to me. It belonged to every mother who had been overlooked, every woman whose sacrifices were invisible, every person who had stayed silent too long. I remember the night I received a message from a stranger named Carol. She wrote, "You made me call my daughter. I haven't heard her voice in years. Thank you." I cried softly in the dark. I realized the power of simply telling the truth, even when it hurts. Even when it's personal, even when it's terrifying. Later I heard from Ethan. He called to say he was taking steps to make amends. He invited me to family dinners, asked my advice on things, shared small victories with me. I listened carefully, still cautious, but willing to allow new memories to form. I also learned something about myself. Pain doesn't have to chain you. Silence doesn't have to define you. Even when the world ignores you, you can still rise. You can still speak. You can still claim your space in your own story. And that's why I'm sharing this with you today. Because I know there are women watching who feel invisible, unheard, forgotten. I know some of you have stayed quiet for years, thinking your voice doesn't matter. I'm here to tell you, it does. Every tear, every sacrifice, every moment of courage counts. So if you're watching this, comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me how you've been brave. Let us hear your voice. Let this space be yours too. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, real, raw, and emotional, subscribe. Join this family of women who speak their truths and lift each other up. Because every woman has a story she never told. And sometimes telling it is the first step toward healing, toward justice, and toward being seen. I sit back in my chair now, the lights dimming, the quiet settling around me. Outside, the city hums softly, and I smile, because for the first time in a very long time, I feel whole. Not perfect, not forgiven entirely, but seen, heard, alive. And that is everything.